Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kurt Watinsky, and this is one of a series of interviews I've been conducting as part of the More Housing Wisconsin project, which is co-sponsored by the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, and the Wisconsin Builders Association. The focus of this series of interviews is on housing, but more particularly, what can local governments do to generate more housing for their communities? We've been talking with local leaders, both representing the public sector and private sector, who've had some experience in developing and implementing zoning reform changes and other strategies designed to for the local governments to work with the private sector to create more housing and different types of housing in our communities. Joining me today, I'm happy to say, is the Community Development Director for the City of Waukesha. Jennifer Andrews has been in that position for 10 years. And prior to that, she worked in various capacities for the city's community development team. So for most of your career, right, Jennifer, you've maybe all of it, you've been working for the city of Waukesha. That's great to
Yes.
hear. And yeah, good. And welcome. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me to talk about Waukesha and housing issues today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and happy to talk about Waukesha. We have a little bit of a unique story, so happy to
Great.
share.
Good, good, terrific. Eventually, I want to talk about how is the city using the TIF affordable housing extension. We'll explain that to people who aren't familiar with it. But first, I thought we'd just start out with, and I like to start out with just a kind of a description of the city as far as maybe demographics, population, kind of the lay of the land with respect to housing. What is the situation with respect to housing in Waukesha?
Sure. So the city of Waukesha is the county seat for Waukesha County, the oldest municipality in the county. We're about 128 years old,
Hmm.
and we've developed kind of consistently through that entire history. So we have about 70,000 people in the city of Waukesha. We're anticipating growth over the next 10 to 15 years of another 15%. And we also have the most affordable housing, the highest number of affordable housing units in the county out of any other municipality. So we have a wide variety of housing in the city. And we've got small lot development, larger lot development. We've got apartments, duplexes, townhomes. And that's all I attribute that to just having a very long development history. So the trends in housing have changed quite a bit over the last 128 years. So that's allowed us to have a very diverse housing stock and diverse amount of types of housing units, sizes, costs, all of those kind of things. So we sit in a very unique position there that some of our counterparts in the county don't have that because maybe they're newer communities and they've built out a little bit differently. So
Right. So they wouldn't have necessarily the range of different types and different of kind of a levels of affordability that seems like the city of Waukesha has because of your history.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Can I ask you, is the city totally built out? Are there possibilities of, new subdivisions, for example, being created in Waukesha, or are you pretty much maxed out as far as available land?
We're pretty much landlocked. We have very little opportunity for annexation. We do have some open land that is cited in our land use plan for future residential, but we expect to be completely built out within the next 10 years.
Hmm.
And the last subdivisions have almost all of that land has been committed in some form or fashion for, it's been platted or in some way committed in terms of development approvals for that land. It's just a matter of getting it all built. So
Hmm.
we have very little opportunity in terms of greenfield development.
Okay. All right. Has the city, I assume the city has done, I think the answer is yes, you've conducted a housing needs assessment. And what did you learn from that? I think you guys did maybe an update of that housing needs assessment in the last year or so. And my number one question is there a shortage of certain types of housing or any type of housing in Waukesha?
Yeah, we did our first housing analysis in 2018, 2019, and then just updated it, the data part of that in this 2024 year. And I think the results actually were a little surprising to me because even in 2018, we had already been hearing for a couple of years of shortage in affordable housing. And so I had a certain set of expectations of how those results would come back, and it surprised me. And I'll say that the update hasn't changed. There hasn't been a great change in the amount of need or what we need. But overall, we're short several hundred housing units as
Mhm.
of today. So we're short about 700 housing units as of right now.
Okay.
And that need continues to increase each year as we project a continued population growth. But really, in terms of unit type, in we broke it down by unit ownership or unit rental, and we looked at both of those categories. And in the rental category, we need almost all types of housing at all different price points. There is one section of affordable housing for families up to about $75,000 a year as household income. So kind of that 40 to 75,000 price range.
Hmm.
We actually have an excess of units in that
Mm.
price range.
Oh,
So in reality, we have an excess of affordable housing in a certain price range in some of those lower price ranges. But at the same time, we're seeing, demands for additional units in that price point. And what we've concluded is there's just not enough movement in the market to allow maybe people that are still living in that starter home but could afford to move into a larger home or would like to move into a larger home because they have a larger family now. There's just not enough supply to allow for movement in the market. And so those affordable units are never becoming available to the people that need them right now.
yes.
And it's a very similar story on the home ownership side, except for the need is even more pronounced on the ownership side. So there's really no category on the ownership side where we have an excess number of units. We might have a small excess in a certain income area, but we need units in all price points basically.
Okay.
And the reason is the same. Our vacancy rates are so low on the ownership side that there's no movement in the market. So for us, it's just purely a supply and demand issue. If we can add more supply, we're going to be able to allow movement in the market, which will open up some of those affordable units that we already have in the city. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
really what we learned. And I was a little bit surprised that we needed so many units even on the higher income levels. Um, but it's the demographics are showing that, and that by adding those additional units on the higher end, we allow for more movement for people to move up. So
Yeah. So my wife and I are a perfect example. We raised our family in this house. We're not about to move out because we don't want to jump into the market, pay a higher interest rate and other things like that. We're just going to probably stay here, which doesn't make this available for up and coming new families. Yeah.
right, or somebody that wants to downsize from their larger home to something smaller, or
Hmm.
you know has lost a spouse, so they're a single person household and so they need a
Hmm.
smaller home. But yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you, has the city taken that information from the housing analysis and implemented any, say, zoning reforms or I don't know, other strategies that might attempt to address the supply needs or maybe create more density? I don't know. Has city done anything
Yeah.
policy-wise? Yeah.
We in 2023 we completed our comprehensive plan and really spent a lot of time thinking about our land use plan. And now in 2024 we have started a comprehensive overhaul of our zoning code to reflect what we decided, the direction we wanted to move in terms of our land use plan. And one of the things that we're doing is making a lot of our older lots conforming. So we've got large swaths of the city that were built 80, 100 years ago. But under our current zoning code, all of those lots are not conforming. So if somebody wants to make a change to their house or split off, if they've got a little bit larger lot and they want to split it off and allow another house to be built there, that's not possible in our current code. So that's one thing we definitely want to change to make sure that affordable housing remains viable and people are willing to invest in it. So that is one thing. And then we're also looking strongly at allowing ADUs in all residential districts.
Hmm.
And in fact, our land use plan doesn't call out a single family category anymore. So duplexes are allowed in all categories. And we've really taken a different look at density. So we're focused more on the design or the unit type or how much a lot coverage there is instead of how many families live there. So we just have taken a different look. If you look at our land use plan, it won't say single family density, two family density, multifamily density. We're looking at it more at the neighborhood level and saying, this is a mixed residential area, or this is a 1, 2, 3 family area, and allowing more flexibility within the categories so that it's not a single use district.
Very interesting. So you mentioned duplexes. So that somebody could build a duplex by right without getting the need to get a conditional use permit in residential zoning district.
Yes,
Yeah,
and I think we'll probably put a little bit of restrictions around that, in terms of making sure that the lot's large enough maybe to
sure.
accommodate that, but that is the intention, and that's what we're moving towards.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what all the literature seems to suggest, and that's what we're talking about at More Housing Wisconsin, trying to move communities in that general direction. So it's great to hear Waukesha's taking those steps.
Well, and if you think about it historically, and we see this a lot in our own housing stock, a lot of those larger, older Victorian homes were converted to duplexes over the years, and that really increased our housing stock. But in our zoning code right now, somebody couldn't do that with a larger home, and there's usually very little impact on the neighborhood when something like that happens. So we're just kind of looking back to the original planning and how we can create more units that way with what
Right,
we have.
right. So let me shift the discussion a little bit here to the TIF, the use by the city of the TIF affordable housing extension. And I just want to explain it to people who might not be familiar with that. It's a provision in the tax incremental financing law that allows a community to right before it closes a TIF district, all the debt's been paid, all the project costs have been paid for. So the TIF district is about ready to be closed. But the law allows a community to extend that district for 1 year, and all the increment that comes in during that time period can be used for affordable housing purposes and improving the housing stock within the city. And a fair number of communities more and more are using this tool to generate revenue to help pay for some housing initiatives that the cities might have in place. So Waukesha has been using the TIF affordable housing extension. And one thing I noticed, and maybe you could talk about, is the city's put together a really nice comprehensive policy kind of guiding city staff on how that money, the funds raised during that 1 year period can be used. You want to talk about how did that policy come together? And then two, maybe just talk about how the city is using the affordable housing extension.
Yeah, the first time we used it was a few years ago when we closed a rather large TID. And in order to get the council comfortable with how these funds would be used, because they are giving up an extra year of revenue, we felt it was important to create a policy, and we worked together with our redevelopment authority to create that policy and then send that on to the council for approval. And now the redevelopment authority is really the implementer of that policy.
Okay.
But so we had a lot of buy-in from the redevelopment authority and the council, and the staff brought forward its ideas, but then there was a really good dialogue. And I think we have a really great program as a result of that. And it's really two-pronged program. One is for housing rehab, and which I've already said, a lot of our housing stock is quite old. And so it needs investment to make sure that it maintains its viable, and that the people that are living in those homes are living in good condition, that they've got energy efficiency and the facilities that they need, and they're being updated regularly, and the roofs don't leak, and all of those kind of things, because older homes can really take a toll on your pocketbook. So we created a program for specifically for that. And as part of that program, the staff can approve up to a certain dollar amount. So if somebody applies for a loan, and we've got that structured on, who's eligible. And also it's not only if the owner is eligible, but is the property eligible? So the property has to be of a certain age to be eligible. And then the owner has to, income qualify. And so so there's a multi-pronged approach on what qualifies. But once they make a loan application up to a certain dollar amount, the staff can approve that as long as it follows the requirements in the policy. And then for loans that are over that amount, then the redevelopment authority gets involved, and they can approve larger loans and the terms of those loans. So that's the rehab program.
Jennifer, well,
Yep.
how's the participation been in that?
It's been fantastic. We allocated 25% of our funds for that program initially, and we have replenished that program 3 times already with additional funds from the development side, actually. And it's been widely popular. We actually just closed it down for the rest of this year because we are waiting for some of those loans to come back into repayments so that we can make more loans. But it has been extremely popular. And our statistics of what people are using it for are exactly what we intended. A lot of roofs, window replacements, plumbing repairs, furnaces, those type of things. So it is exactly what we were hoping the program would be used for. So, and it also kind of proved out the need for this type of program as well.
Great. So I interrupted you. So there's also this development side.
Yes. So we set aside money for developing new affordable housing units. And what we've done with that in the last couple of years is supported a lot of Habitat for Humanity construction projects. They've been very active in the city of Waukesha. And we have found that the best way for the program to be sustainable long-term and to assist Habitat is to provide construction lending at a very low interest rate, so that the funds come back and we can make more construction loans to them. The benefit for them is in this higher interest rate environment, they get a real break on the interest. And so that's worked very well. And then also we've been talking to developers about building new, smaller scale, multifamily, affordable projects. It's just been tougher to get those projects over the finish line from a financing perspective, because we're just one piece of that financing puzzle for them. But we're hoping that in 2025, we might be able to make a larger, I'd say like 20 to 30 unit project happen using that as well.
Great. The Habitat for Humanity part of the program, does that loan go to the family who's going to move into the house that's being constructed, or does it go to Habitat for Humanity to kind of finance the initial construction, or how does that work?
Yeah, the loan goes to Habitat for Humanity. So it's between the city and the Habitat. And then when Habitat closes on the house with the new owner, then the city gets paid back and they get it into a final mortgage with the new owner.
Okay.
So, yeah, so we're dealing directly with Habitat.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, I've seen some type of relationship like this between cities and Habitat for Humanity in other parts of the state. But did the city reach out to Habitat? Did Habitat come to the city? And how did this relationship develop, I guess?
It really started because Habitat was doing some work in a TIF district that we had, and they had purchased some houses that they were rehabbing, but then they were also building new houses. And so we were giving them some TIF assistance for those activities. And that's how we really built our relationship. So when we put this program together, it was a natural extension of the relationship we had already started with them. And it really came to fruition when there was a one city block property that was vacated by a manufacturer and needed to be redeveloped. And Habitat stepped forward to do that. And so this was part of the way that we supported them, is through these loans. And then we also provided some ARPA funding and things like that. But it really helped them get that whole block of development off the start mark.
Neat. So I assume the city has these two programs. Are they exclusively funded by affordable housing extensions? Is it routine for every TIF district now that closes? Do you seek extension, or is that kind of on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, for us, we create a closeout strategy for our TIF portfolio. So we're looking at 5 years ahead about which districts we expect to be closing. And we don't extend every district. It really depends on the district. if the city needs that revenue, right
Hmm.
away, or if we can afford to extend for a year. And then also generally, we've been extending the larger districts and letting the smaller districts close as scheduled.
Hmm.
And so it gives us more bang for our buck, and it meets the city's needs for revenue, but also feeding our affordable housing funds. So we've got a very managed approach to how we extend TIFs and if we extend them or not. So I'd
Sure.
say since we started doing it, we've extended maybe half of the TIDs that we've closed.
Okay.
But I will also say that once we set up the policy guidelines for the programs, we've also found additional funding for those programs. So there's TIF extension money in there, but we've also used CDBG funding
Ah,
for projects that qualify. We've put ARPA money in there. So we've got that money in there. We've gotten grants. So it started as a TIF extension program, but it's really grown to a little larger than that. So we have multiple funding sources. It
that was
gets a
gonna
little
be,
tricky to make sure that we're following all the rules for each of those funding sources, but
yeah.
it's really made it more sustainable.
Right, right. That was going to be my next question is if there are other sources of revenue being fed into that affordable housing fund. Have you ever had the need to put general fund dollars from like the city's regular budget, or you're really going to other sources like you said, grant ARPA and things like that?
Yeah, we have not put any general obligation funds or any
Yeah.
tax dollars
Hmm.
beyond the TIF dollars
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
that fund. So we've just been looking elsewhere for other opportunities.
Sure. Great. Well, Jennifer, is there anything else you'd like to share with us about either the city's use of the affordable housing extension or any other aspect of housing challenges and housing strategies that the city has before it?
I think there's two things. One, on the affordable housing extension, our experience was having a policy in place and really thinking very deeply and hard about what we wanted to accomplish with the money before that closure, or actually creating, doing the TIF extension, I think was part of the key to our success. So that once the TID closed, the very first one closed that we had extended, and we had the money, we knew exactly how we were going to spend it. And it's really provided also some confidence in our aldermen that we're using the money how it was intended, and everybody had a say in that. And I think that's really been key. That part of it is really thinking about that, and in a thought being very thoughtful about that up front.
Yeah.
And then I think the second thing is that I think it's really important, if you can afford it, to do the housing study like we did for your community, because we were surprised with the outcomes, and it's really helped drive the discussion. And knowing exactly what kind of rental units we need in each price point, or home ownership units in each price point, has really helped us develop and um, in a more meaningful way, so that we know what we're hitting certain goals, and also instructed us in that we need to hit all those price points with all the different types of housing, and not just focus in narrowly on one. And that's just our story. Another community might have a completely different story where they're really just lacking in one price point. And I think unless you do that study, you really don't know. And it's been a meaningful tool for the aldermen, but then also for the public, just educating the public as well, and why we're building certain types of housing, or why we're approving certain types of housing, or why we're incentivizing certain types of housing.
Hmm.
Um, so I think those two things have really changed the housing discussion for
Yeah.
Waukesha.
I was struck by when you said that before the housing analysis report was completed, you kind of intuitively thought maybe, the conclusion would be one way. But even in your position that you are with, the knowledge and information you have, it turned out to be, some of the results were more surprising than you would have anticipated. So that's telling to me that it is very worthwhile to have some kind of analysis, outside analysis, comprehensively done for a community.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, I really appreciate you taking the time to respond to some of my questions and tell us a little bit about Waukesha and housing and using the affordable housing extension. And I thought it was very informative, and I think other communities can learn from Waukesha's experience. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And our policy is right on our website too, if anybody wants to look it up, or we're always happy to share as well.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer.